The day Margaret was buried, I stood at the graveside, thinking I knew my wife of 47 years completely. I was wrong, dead wrong. It started 3 days after the funeral. I was going through her things, not because I wanted to, but because when a wife dies, somebody has to deal with all those small, intimate objects. Her reading glasses, her handwritten recipe cards, the silk scarf she'd worn to every holiday dinner for the last 30 years. I was in her study, that small room at the back of the house where she kept her gardening journals and old family photos, when I noticed something. The bookshelf against the east wall, the mahogany one we'd bought together at an estate sale in 1989, it didn't sit flush against the wall like it always had. My name is Warren. I'm 73 years old, and at that moment I felt older than I'd ever felt in my life. I pulled the bookshelf away from the wall, expecting maybe a mouse or a water stain. Instead, I found a safe. A real safe. The kind with a dial combination lock, maybe 14 inches square, painted to match the wallpaper behind it. And below the dial, engraved in small letters, Genevieve's safe. Genevieve, that was Margaret's middle name. The name nobody called her except her mother, and her mother had been dead for 16 years. My hands were shaking when I touched it. I didn't have the combination. I'd never even known this existed. It took me 45 minutes to find the combination. She'd written it in the back of an old pocket calendar from 1998, wedged between 2 books of poetry on that very shelf. 37, 14, 22. 3 numbers that would change everything I believed about my marriage. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, there were exactly 3 things. A letter, written in Margaret's elegant cursive, a small brass key, no larger than my thumb, ornate and old-fashioned, and a photograph. The photograph I'll describe to you in detail because I've stared at it for 3 months now, sitting at my kitchen table, wondering if I ever really knew my wife at all. It showed 3 people. My son Richard, age maybe 28 in the photo, so that would have been around 1982. My daughter Catherine, perhaps 24, and a woman I didn't recognize, much younger, maybe 19, with bruises on her face, visible bruises, healing bruises around her left eye and down her neck, and written on the back in Margaret's handwriting, Eleanor, August 10th, 1982, before they sent her away. Eleanor. We didn't have an Eleanor in our family. My hands literally felt numb as I opened the letter. I sat down on the edge of Margaret's reading chair, the same chair she'd sat in every evening reading her mysteries and romance novels, and I opened that letter. It began, "Warren, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm leaving this for you because you deserve to know the truth." Our children did exactly what I've spent my entire life trying to prevent them from doing. The letter was 7 pages long, single-spaced, written over what looked like several different dates, with the earliest dated October 1983, 2 months after Richard got married, 3 weeks after Catherine got engaged. Margaret explained, in that careful, measured way she had, that Eleanor was the daughter of her college roommate, Patricia Voss. Patricia had reached out to Margaret in 1982, desperate. Eleanor's father, Patricia's ex-husband, had been physically abusing her, and Patricia had nowhere to turn. No money, no family support. She was terrified Eleanor would be killed. So Margaret, my sweet, quiet Margaret, did something extraordinary. She helped them. She and Patricia created false documents, social security numbers, a birth certificate. They established Eleanor in a group home upstate with an identity that protected her from her father.
Margaret had paid for everything out of a separate account that I never knew about. $35,000 over 7 years. But then she found out something worse. Richard and Catherine had somehow discovered Eleanor's real identity. They'd found her using a private investigator in 1982, right after Patricia first reached out to Margaret. And Richard, angry that this stranger might somehow have a claim on our family inheritance, had threatened to expose Eleanor to her abusive father unless she disappeared permanently. I had to read that part 3 times. My son, the one I'd paid for law school, the one I'd bragged about to my friends at the club. My son had blackmailed an abused teenager into exile. The letter continued. Margaret had paid them off. $40,000 to Richard, $30,000 to Catherine. She called it an investment in family stability, but it was extortion, plain and simple. She'd drained a savings account I didn't know about, moved money she'd inherited from her aunt in 1974, and she'd kept Eleanor alive through another decade with annual payments to her new identity's housing and schooling. But here's where it got worse. In 1995, when Eleanor was 31, Margaret discovered that Richard had contacted the group home again, threatening to expose Eleanor all over again to collect another $40,000. Margaret wrote, "I've cut them off. I've made arrangements that they will receive nothing from my estate except the house. Everything else, my stocks, my bonds, the insurance policies, the annuities, the safe deposit box at First National, all of it goes to Eleanor Voss, whose real name is Eleanor Catherine Brennan, and who has suffered more injustice than I could ever compensate." She'd changed her will in 1996, without telling me. Margaret had been planning for this moment for 16 years. The key in the safe opened a safety deposit box at First National Bank on Riverside Drive. Inside were Eleanor's documents, her real birth certificate, her adoption papers. Margaret had legally adopted her in 1996. Her trust documents, everything she needed to claim an estate worth roughly $2 million. And a letter to Eleanor, which I read next because I had to know what Margaret wanted this woman to understand. In it, Margaret apologized. She apologized for not doing more. She apologized for paying off the blackmail instead of going to police. She apologized for being afraid. She explained that Eleanor had a half-sister, Patricia's daughter from a second marriage, living in Seattle, that she had family, that she wasn't alone, and that Margaret's greatest regret was that she hadn't had the courage to do this while she was alive. I sat in that chair for probably 2 hours, maybe longer. I couldn't tell you exactly how long because time did something strange. Eventually, I called Eleanor. I got the number from the adoption papers. She was living in Bend, Oregon, working as a high school counselor. When I told her who I was, there was a long silence. "He's dead," she said. That was the first thing she said to me.
Your son, Richard. He died in 2001. A car accident. Did you know that? No. Richard had died in a car accident in 2001. But we'd been told it was an accident. Just bad luck on a wet road. My mother had someone look into it, Eleanor said. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't speeding. He had maintenance records showing everything was fine with the car. But an hour after trying to extract money from me again, through a lawyer that time, he died. I didn't know what to say to that. Your wife helped my mother, Eleanor said, when no one else would, when she had no reason to. I don't know much about you, Mr. Henderson, but Margaret, she was good. I hope you know that. Catherine, I asked. What about Catherine? She had a stroke in 2007, Eleanor said. 39 years old. She survived it, but she lost her ability to speak clearly, lost most of her mobility. She's been in a care facility for 15 years. Your wife visited her once a month until the dementia set in, paid for her care without your daughter knowing it was Margaret. My daughter, who'd taken $30,000 to betray a teenager, who'd spent the last 15 years unable to even articulate that betrayal, who'd been cared for until just last year by the woman she'd tried to extort. I went to that bank the next morning. I opened Margaret's safety deposit box with that little brass key. Inside were the documents, just like she'd said, and a check. A personal check from Margaret to Eleanor, written the week before Margaret went into the hospital, made out for $500,000, dated but never deposited. On the memo line, Margaret had written, "For living, for loving, for surviving." I drove to Oregon. I met Eleanor in person. She's 52 now, gray in her hair, kind eyes. She teaches kids with trauma histories. She works with abuse victims. She told me that Margaret's message, the letter from the safe, had changed her life. It gave her permission to stop being afraid, permission to claim something that was hers. She also told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Your wife was the only person in my life who understood that sometimes love means doing things that cost you everything, even when nobody else knows you did it." I gave her the $500,000 check. I told her that Margaret had one request before she died, that Eleanor live completely, fully, without shame. The estate was transferred. Eleanor's inheritance is secure. She's opened a foundation for abuse survivors, and she's doing work that matters. As for Catherine, she's still in that facility, still can't speak clearly, but she receives the same monthly visits, and I've made sure that any care she needs is paid for with my own money. Not as guilt, but as something her mother understood long before I did. Redemption sometimes means showing kindness to people who don't deserve it. I sold the house, kept Margaret's study exactly as it was for 6 months, just so I could sit in that chair and understand the woman I'd lived with for nearly 5 decades. She was so much braver than I ever was, so much more willing to sacrifice. The safe is still there on my dining room table, empty now except for that little brass key in the photograph. I'm 73 years old, and I'm still learning who Margaret was. I'm learning that marriage is not just what happens in plain sight. I'm learning that the people we love often operate in the dark, protecting others, bearing weight that we never even see. Sometimes I wonder if she wanted me to find it, if leaving the combination where I could find it was her way of making sure I understood, before she was gone, that she'd chosen Eleanor. That in the end, the family she'd built in secret was the truest measure of who she was. Every morning, I look at that safe, empty but full of everything Margaret never said, but showed me through her silence, her sacrifice, her unwavering commitment to justice for someone who was nobody to me, but everything to her. That's the thing about love, I think. You don't really know how deep it goes until someone dies and leaves you holding a key to all the secrets. I spend a lot of time with Eleanor now. We have coffee. She tells me about the foundation. I tell her about Margaret. And sometimes I see a gesture Eleanor makes, a way she tilts her head when she's thinking. That's exactly like Margaret. Not because they share blood, but because Margaret shaped her. Margaret saved her. Margaret made her who she is. And I realized that the safe behind the bookshelf wasn't just about money or documents or even justice. It was about a woman telling her husband, after 47 years, who she really was.